Welcome back, guys, to MysteryCon. On this channel, I narrate conspiracy theories to help you sleep and relax. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe, and also share this video with your friends and family to help them fall asleep too. Please let me know where you're watching this from and what time it is for you. Now sit back, relax, and let's begin. Dr. Ruper's coordinates led me deep into a remote area of the desert, far from any major cities. It took me several hours to reach the location. A secluded compound tucked away behind a high electrified fence. The compound appeared to be abandoned, but I could sense something was off. The moment I stepped out of the car, I felt a weight pressing down on me. An overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone. I could feel the weight of everything building to a breaking point. The final pieces were in place. I had gathered everything I needed to expose the truth about the artifact, the global conspiracy, and the people who had been using its power to control the world. But as I prepared to confront them, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. The deeper I went, the more dangerous everything became. They had already silenced so many people. What would stop them from silencing me too? I couldn't sleep that night. The weight of everything I had uncovered so far was crashing down on me. Each piece of the puzzle was bigger and more disturbing than the last, and the questions I had seemed to multiply the longer I investigated. But there was one thing I knew for sure. The truth about the Martian expedition and the artifact was out there, and I was getting closer to it. I had barely started processing the revelations from my conversation with Michael when everything began to spiral. It wasn't just the truth I was chasing anymore. It was my life. The closer I got to the artifact, the more dangerous things became. I could feel the walls closing in. I hadn't expected to find anyone willing to help me, not after everything I had uncovered. The deeper I went, the more isolated I felt. I had burned bridges with people I trusted, lost contacts, and had to go underground to keep myself safe. The government and the shadowy group pulling the strings were everywhere, watching, waiting, ready to silence anyone who got too close to the truth. I thought I had seen everything, but as I stood there clutching the documents and staring at the glowing artifact one last time, I realized how little I truly understood about what was at stake. The world as I knew it was about to change, and whether I liked it or not, I had become a key player in a game that spanned beyond Earth itself. It all started with a simple email. Well, I guess nothing in my line of work is really simple. I had been digging through old government files for a different story, something about a corrupt politician who had been siphoning funds from education programs. But then, buried in the middle of a batch of dusty archives, I found something far more interesting. A report, dated decades ago, from a secret Mars expedition. The artifact had always been more than just an object. It was a key. One that could unlock humanity's future, or end it. I had uncovered the truth, exposed the conspiracy, and come face to face with the very forces that sought to control the artifact. But as I stood on the edge of the precipice, ready to reveal everything, I realized that I had no idea what would happen next. The betrayal hit harder than I expected. Not only had Sarah turned on me, but she had also fed the very enemy I was trying to expose with the critical information that could bring everything crumbling down. It wasn't just a matter of losing an ally. It felt like I had lost a part of myself. Trust had always been a vital part of this investigation, and now it had been shattered. The folder Anna gave me weighed heavy in my hands, as if it contained more than just paper. It felt like a key to everything I had been chasing, everything I had been risking. I didn't waste any time. I retreated to a small nondescript hotel room on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes, and opened the folder. Inside I found several documents, photographs and notes, all pointing to one undeniable truth. The artifact was far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. The more I learned, the less I understood. It was as if every new piece of the puzzle only led to more questions, and the answers I found, if I could find any at all, were always more terrifying than the last. I couldn't help but feel like I was in too deep. But once you're hooked, it's almost impossible to walk away. So I kept digging. And with each new lead, I felt the weight of the conspiracy growing heavier. The more I learned, the more I understood just how deep this conspiracy went. I had barely scratched the surface, but already it felt like I was being pulled into something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. The artifact wasn't just an ancient piece of technology from a lost civilization. It was a power that had been hidden from the public for decades. And the government wasn't the only entity trying to suppress it. There were others, groups that had been watching the artifact's every move, and they were just as determined to keep it under wraps. The more I learned, the more the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a disturbing way. The artifact, its power, and the global conspiracy surrounding it were only a small part of the true agenda. The people who had been manipulating world governments for decades weren't just interested in controlling power. They were waging a covert war, one that would reshape the entire world order. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything else. That report, the one I had found buried in the archives, kept calling me, whispering to me, telling me there was more to it, so I did what any curious journalist would do. I dug deeper. The warning had been clear, and yet I couldn't stop. It was as though I was too far gone, too deep into this conspiracy to turn back. Every time I thought I had a grasp on the truth, it slipped through my fingers and something darker, something more dangerous emerged in its place. But that was the nature of the artifact. It didn't just hold the truth, it manipulated the very people who sought it. After the discovery of the map, I knew I couldn't go any further without understanding who was truly in control of this operation, who had orchestrated the cover-up, and more importantly, who was still pulling the strings from the shadows. At first, I thought it was just another classified document, one of those reports full of military jargon and redacted paragraphs that didn't say much of anything. But as I skimmed through it, something caught my eye. The expedition didn't just explore Mars. It found something that shouldn't have been there. Alien ruins, ancient structures on Mars that suggested an alien civilization had once existed, thriving long before humanity even thought about the stars. But I couldn't afford to waste time mourning. The clock was ticking, and with each passing hour, I knew the conspiracy was getting closer to tightening its grip on everything I had uncovered. The government wasn't the only threat I faced anymore. There were others. Dangerous forces that had their own stake in keeping the truth about the artifact buried. If I didn't act quickly, I would become just another person who vanished without a trace. But then, out of nowhere, I received a cryptic message, this time from someone claiming to be on the inside of the conspiracy. The message was short, just one sentence. I can help you, but you need to meet me in person. Tonight, I spent the next few days piecing together the fragments of information Michael had given me. I needed to find more evidence, something concrete that could prove everything he had said. But no matter where I turned, I kept hitting dead ends. Every lead I followed seemed to lead back to a blank wall of government secrecy, as if someone had been systematically erasing all traces of the Martian expedition. I spent the next few weeks trying to make sense of everything. The artifact had caused untold damage, both to those who came in contact with it and to the very fabric of reality itself. But it wasn't just about the artifact anymore. It was about power, control, and the lengths to which those in power would go to protect it. I'd come here expecting answers, but I wasn't prepared for the truth I was about to uncover. The artifact was more than just a tool. It was the cornerstone of a plan that had been in the works for decades. Those in control of it weren't just experimenting with the artifact's power. They were actively using it to push humanity toward a global conflict, one that would shift the balance of power permanently. And the worst part? They had already begun executing their plan. The artifact wasn't just a tool for power. It was a remnant of an ancient Martian civilization, one that had been wiped out long before humanity even reached for the stars. The artifact, I now knew, held the key to both their destruction and their survival. But it wasn't just a weapon or a source of power. It was a legacy. The Martians had created it as a last-ditch effort to save themselves from an extinction-level event, an event that could easily occur again if humanity didn't understand the warning they had left behind. The email had led me to that initial report, but it wasn't enough. There had to be more. Whoever had sent me that anonymous message knew exactly what they were doing. They gave me just enough to spark my interest and then left the rest up to me. But now, it was my turn to figure out the rest of the puzzle. The first set of documents contained detailed analysis reports from scientists who had studied the artifact, but the findings were contradictory. Some believed it was merely a sophisticated piece of alien technology, others insisted it was far more. Some kind of living entity capable of manipulating its surroundings and even influencing the minds of those who came in contact with it. The following morning, I received an unexpected message from Jake. He was on edge, and I could hear the tension in his voice. The last lead took me to a heavily guarded underground facility located miles from the compound I had visited earlier. This was where Dr. Roper had been hiding, where he had spent years researching the artifact and its devastating effects. It wasn't just a research lab, it was the heart of the conspiracy. I knew if I could reach him, I could finally piece together the full scope of their plan and expose the truth once and for all. The next breakthrough came when I was reviewing an old file I had retrieved from the archives. It was a journal entry from Dr. Harper written during the mission. The entry was brief, but it mentioned something I hadn't noticed before: a secure transmission received from an unknown source just before the expedition's final report was filed. The journal didn't elaborate on the contents, but it mentioned that the transmission had been erased from official records immediately. That sent chills down my spine. If someone was actively erasing evidence, that meant they were still hiding something. The world wasn't ready for the truth. No one was. The power that lay in the hands of the shadow organization was too vast, too uncontrollable, but I had to try. I had to make the world see the danger of what they were playing with. The artifact was a gift from the stars, but it came with a deadly price. I had to find a way to make sure humanity didn't fall into the same trap the Martians had. As I approached the entrance, I was greeted by a set of security cameras, all pointed directly at me. No one had come to stop me, but I knew that wasn't because I was welcome. I had just crossed into their territory, and I had no idea what I was walking into. But as I approached the entrance to the facility, everything inside me screamed to turn back. The place was a fortress, surrounded by layers of security, armed guards and surveillance cameras. I had no doubt that the people inside would stop at nothing to protect what they had built. The artifact's power wasn't just a weapon, it was the key to their domination, and they would do anything to keep it out of the wrong hands. I didn't trust it. There was no name, no clue as to who this person was, and nothing to verify if this was just another trap set to lure me into danger. But then again, I didn't have much of a choice. If I wanted to uncover the truth, I needed to take risks. I had gotten closer to uncovering its secrets, and that's when I made a crucial mistake. In a desperate move to get the information I needed, I reached out to someone I thought I could trust, someone who had been a source of support through this madness. Her name was Sarah, and she had been a confidant of mine since the very beginning. She had always believed in the importance of exposing the truth, Even when the stakes were high, I reached out to the press, to journalists and organizations that still had the courage to tell the truth. It wasn't easy. The government and its allies had a chokehold on the media, controlling the narrative and silencing anyone who came too close to the truth. But I managed to get the information out. Slowly, people began to piece the story together. The reports leaked, the public demanded answers, and soon, the world was waking up to the reality of the artifact. I spent the next few days trying to track down anyone who might have had access to the transmission. My search led me to an encrypted communication system used by the military, but access was locked behind layers of security. I didn't have the clearance to crack it, but I knew someone who did. I spent the next few days combing through every document, every piece of intelligence I could find. The true scope of their plot was far more intricate than I had realized. They weren't just controlling governments, they were engineering crises, manipulating economies, and orchestrating wars to create the perfect conditions for a new world order. And the artifact, with its mysterious influence over human minds, was the catalyst. I spent the next few days on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder, trying to keep my movements as hidden as possible. But no matter how careful I was, I knew the walls were closing in. I started reaching out to former government officials who had worked in the space program, hoping someone would be willing to talk. But every time I made a call or sent an email, I was met with dead ends. People were either too afraid to talk, or they had been silenced long ago. I started searching for other leads, other mentions of the Martian expedition in public records, anything. It wasn't long before I found a name that stood out in the documents. Dr. Emily Harper, the lead scientist on the mission. But according to the public records, she had died under mysterious circumstances shortly after the mission was completed. There were no details, just a statement from the government claiming it was a tragic accident, but I wasn't buying it. Something didn't add up. Listen, I found something. Something you need to see. It's big. The document was a mess. Half of it was blacked out while the rest was barely legible, as if whoever wrote it had tried to erase everything but the basics. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore, a mention of the artifact. I had no idea what it was, but that one line stuck with me. The documents in my hands confirmed it. The Martians had used the artifact as a form of defense, a way to prevent their own destruction. They had known their civilization was on the brink of collapse, and they had created the artifact to protect them from whatever cosmic forces were threatening their existence. But in the end, it had failed them. The artifact's power had consumed them, twisted their minds, and ultimately led to their downfall. Then, one evening, something strange happened. I was at my apartment reviewing the mission reports when I got a call from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was distorted, as though it was being filtered through a voice changer. It was a photograph that stood out among the rest, a black and white image of the artifact. But this time, it wasn't just lying dormant on a lab table. In the photo, the artifact seemed to be reacting to the presence of the scientist standing nearby. There was an eerie glow emanating from it, and the scientist's eyes were wide open, but his expression was unnervingly vacant. It was as if he wasn't fully aware of what he was doing. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I stared at the photo. The artifact didn't just exist. It seemed to live. It was sentient in some way, and it had the ability to manipulate those who came into its orbit. As I sifted through the last of the records, it became clear the Martians hadn't just lost their war with nature. They had been undone by their own creation, the very artifact they believed would save them. In their desperation, they had turned it into something it was never meant to be, a weapon that ended up consuming them. The artifact, it seemed, had a mind of its own. It didn't just grant power, it demanded it, reshaping those who sought it. But the moment I trusted her with the full extent of my investigation, everything changed. But the shadow organization wasn't going to sit idly by. They fought back with everything they had, spinning their own narrative, trying to discredit the story, hiding behind layers of power and wealth. They had their own plans for the artifact, plans that could reshape the world into something dark, something we might never recover from. Enter Jake Sullivan, an old friend of mine from college who had gone on to work in cybersecurity. Jake was always the best at breaking into systems, and while I knew he wasn't comfortable with illegal activity, I also knew he had a soft spot for me. I didn't want to pull him into this, but I had no choice. I couldn't help myself. My curiosity kicked in, and I dove deeper into the archives, pulling up any additional files related to the mission. The more I read, the stranger it got. There were references to government cover-ups, people who had vanished after coming too close to the truth, and a strange urgency in the language of the reports. The expedition's findings weren't just groundbreaking, they were dangerous enough that the government had hidden them away, wiped them from public knowledge, and gone to great lengths to silence anyone who might try to dig them up. Now I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat and headed straight to his place. As I walked into his apartment, I noticed Jake was visibly shaken. The computer screen in front of him displayed a series of images and text files. I flipped through the rest of the folder, finding transcripts of conversations between the scientists and government officials, and the pieces began to fall into place. The people studying the artifact were more than just curious. They were obsessed. They had started to believe that the artifact held the key to unlocking untold power, that it was more than a relic of a lost civilization. It was a source of power, a source of knowledge beyond their wildest dreams. I knew I couldn't go in alone, but there was no one left to trust. The government's agents were everywhere, and I had no way of knowing who I could rely on anymore. So, I did what I had to do. I used everything I had learned to break in. It wasn't long before the threats escalated. The first one came in the form of a simple note slipped under my door. It wasn't signed, but the message was clear. Stop digging, or you'll be next. It wasn't until I managed to track down an old friend, Paul Whitaker, that I got the breakthrough I needed. Paul had been a high-ranking intelligence officer working for a covert government agency, the kind of people who dealt with classified black-budget projects. He was a tough guy, not easily intimidated, and I knew if anyone had answers, it was him. So I did what I do best. I tracked down her former colleagues. Stop looking, the voice commanded coldly. You're in over your head. That night, I met the whistleblower in a dark alley behind a rundown warehouse. It was risky, but the message had been clear. This was my only chance to move forward. The moment I entered the compound, I was struck by the contrast between its desolate appearance and the high-tech equipment hidden inside. The building was old, but the machinery I found in the basement was state-of-the-art. Everything was connected to one central server, one that seemed to hold every piece of information about the artifact, its origins and its power. But what really struck me was the extent of the operation. It wasn't just a government cover-up. This was an international conspiracy. There were reports detailing the ways in which the artifact had been used to manipulate entire populations. It wasn't just about political power. It was about controlling thoughts, beliefs, and actions. Those in power had discovered a way to use the artifact to influence the very fabric of human consciousness. And now they were using it to create chaos. A chaos that would ultimately lead to their rise. But there was a problem. I wasn't the first to stumble onto this. The email that led me to this discovery wasn't sent by some whistleblower or disgruntled scientist. It was anonymous, a message to me from someone who clearly knew I'd be the one to uncover the truth. The timing of it all was too perfect. And that was when the first chill ran down my spine. But what kind of power? And why had the government gone to such extreme lengths to keep it hidden? I froze, a chill running down my spine. My first instinct was to hang up, but something told me I needed to hear this out. I had arranged to meet Sarah at a small cafe outside the city. I didn't expect any trouble. It was just a routine meeting to exchange information, but as soon as I sat down across from her, I could tell something was off. Her eyes were too calm, her movements too deliberate. She wasn't acting like herself. I stared at the artifact, realizing the full weight of what I had uncovered. The people who controlled it now, those shadowy figures I had been chasing, had no idea what they were dealing with. They thought they could control the artifact, use its power to shape the world as they saw fit. But the Martians had made that mistake, and it had led to their extinction. I was nervous. As I stood there, waiting, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into another trap. But then, I saw a shadow move in the distance. The person stepped into the dim light, revealing a woman in her mid-40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a stern face. In the end, it wasn't about exposing them. It wasn't about getting revenge or even making sure the world knew the truth. It was about making sure the artifact never fell into their hands again. And for that, I had to make the ultimate sacrifice. It took a couple of weeks, but eventually I got a hold of Dr. Harper's old assistant, a man named Michael Daniels. He was reluctant to talk at first, but I could tell he knew more than he was letting on. After some back and forth, he finally cracked, agreeing to meet me at a secluded cafe far from the city. It wasn't easy. I had to outsmart security systems, sneak past guards, and navigate a maze of high-tech surveillance. But every step I took brought me closer to the truth and to Dr. Roper. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stay undetected, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stop now. It's not just a transmission from Mars, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's a map to the artifact. Jake, I need your help, I said over the phone, my voice low and urgent. It's about a government cover-up. I know it sounds crazy, but it's real and it's huge. The file I found on Dr. Roper confirmed it. The artifact wasn't just a tool for controlling power. It was a global project, with countries and powerful organizations all vying to control it. The United States, China, Russia, and several multinational corporations had all formed an alliance to study the artifact, each one hoping to weaponize its power. This was the truth I had been searching for. The artifact wasn't just an alien relic. It was a bargaining chip in a secret, high-stakes, global game. The note was enough to make my blood run cold, but it didn't stop me. I knew what I was up against, and I wasn't backing down. If anything, it made me more determined. The threat was real, but it wasn't new. People had been disappearing for years, all of them connected to the artifact and the dark forces trying to control it. The world was already on the brink of war, but no one knew the true cause. From the economic downturns to the rise in political instability, everything pointed to the same conclusion. The conspiracy was orchestrating global unrest in order to bring about their vision of a new world order. We met in a quiet bar far from any government surveillance. Paul didn't waste time with pleasantries. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Finally, after what felt like hours, I reached the heart of the facility, and there, standing in front of me, was Dr. Roper. He looked older than I remembered, his face weary and worn, but his eyes still carried the same intelligence and determination I had seen years ago. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be the one who sealed the fate of the artifact, who made the decision that would change everything. But I had no choice. The artifact's power was too dangerous. It couldn't be allowed to remain in the hands of those who who wanted to control it. I found a particularly disturbing file detailing secret military operations in various countries, where the artifact's power was being used to control soldiers and leaders alike. Entire armies had been affected, their loyalty twisted by the subtle influence of the artifact. They weren't just fighting for their countries, they were fighting for the very people who had been manipulating them, unknowingly serving a shadowy elite who sought to control the future of humanity. I froze. A map? I had one last choice to make. I could expose the truth and risk everything, or I could keep quiet, let the world remain blissfully ignorant of the power that lay beneath our feet. The artifact held the potential to reshape the future of humanity. It could either be the salvation of our species or its end. But I couldn't let the mistakes of the Martians be repeated. I have everything you need, I said, sliding the file across the table to her. This should give us everything we need to expose them. I pored over the documents, my head spinning as I tried to make sense of the scope of what I was reading. The conspiracy wasn't just about one government. It was about the entire world order, a system where the most powerful nations and organizations had come together to harness the artifact's potential. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized that the artifact's power was something far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. I took the note as a warning, one that pushed me forward instead of holding me back. I needed to find the next piece of the puzzle, and the only way to do that was to keep moving forward. Amanda, she said, her voice steady but filled with an urgency that put me on edge. I've been watching your investigation. You're digging into something much bigger than you realize. Jake paused for a moment, probably weighing his options. You've got to stop doing this, man. You're playing with fire, he warned. Michael was nervous. He kept looking over his shoulder like someone was following him. He wouldn't meet my eyes for long, his hands shaking as he stirred his coffee. The answer came in the form of a final report, written by Dr. Harper herself. It was a memo addressed to the highest echelons of the government, warning of the dangers of continuing to study the artifact. According to Dr. Harper, the artifact wasn't just influencing people, it was changing them. It was slowly taking control of their thoughts, their actions and their wills. It had already caused several scientists to spiral into madness, and she feared that if it wasn't contained, the same would happen to the entire world. Who is this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Whoever had sent me the email seemed to know exactly what I was searching for. I had no idea how much of a mess I was about to step into, how deep this rabbit hole would go, or what kind of forces would try to stop me from uncovering the truth. But I couldn't turn back now. The story was too big, too important. You're digging into something you don't understand, he said, his voice low. You have no idea what you're up against. I decided to go after the one person who might still be able to help. Dr. Roper, the scientist who had been a part of the original Mars expedition. He was the one person who knew the artifact's true nature better than anyone, and I knew he had information that could blow the lid off the entire operation. But he had gone underground years ago, likely to escape the very forces I was up against. If I was going to find him, I had to be clever. I didn't ask any questions at first, I just listened. Anna had worked in the government's special space program for over 20 years. An insider who had access to classified information. She was as familiar with the artifact as anyone could be. I had to get to Dr. Roper. He was the key to understanding the full extent of the artifact's power, and he was the only one who could help me bring this all to light. But I was running out of time. I know, I replied, swallowing my fear. But I can't let this go. If you help me, we can expose everything. I made the decision to destroy it. With the help of a few trusted allies, we set a plan in motion, one that would take the artifact deep into a remote, uncharted part of the world where no one would ever be able to find it. We destroyed the facility where it had been held, erasing all traces of its existence. and we made sure that no one would be able to uncover its secrets again. I shouldn't be talking to you, he said in a hushed voice, glancing around. You don't understand how deep this goes. I wasn't sure what the future held. I didn't know how I was going to stop the shadow organization from taking control of the artifact, but I knew one thing for certain. I had to make sure the world understood the full scope of what was at stake. The artifact wasn't just a source of power. It was a warning that humanity was on the brink of repeating the same mistakes that had destroyed the Martians. In her final entry, she wrote, "The artifact is not just a tool, it's a weapon, and we are the ones who have been used." It wasn't just a weapon, it was something that could fundamentally alter the balance of power on Earth. Those who controlled it could control everything, from political systems to the global economy, even weather patterns and climate. The world as we knew it was at the mercy of those who had access to the artifact, and no one knew how dangerous it truly was. Jake nodded. "Yeah, it's encrypted, but I cracked it. This is where the artifact is. And it's not where we thought it was." Sarah hesitated for a moment, glancing around the cafe. It wasn't until she looked at the file that I saw the subtle shift in her expression. Something I couldn't quite place, but something that told me she was no longer the person I had once trusted. "Then tell me, Paul, who's behind all of this?" I asked, leaning in closer. There was only one thing left to do: follow the breadcrumbs and see where they led. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice low. "You don't understand what you're up against. You're investigating something far more dangerous than you realize. There are forces out there that will do whatever it takes to keep the truth hidden. The artifact is only the beginning." As I began piecing together the final fragments of the conspiracy, I realized something that shook me to my core. The artifact wasn't just a weapon. It was the ultimate tool of control. It didn't just influence people. It rewrote their very desires, their fears, and their motives. The people in charge had been using it to create a world where they were untouchable, where they controlled everything. As I left the compound, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The government, the shadow organization, and even the people who had been trying to stop me, they were all part of a bigger picture, one that spanned across time and space. And somewhere out there, in the depths of the universe, there was a civilization that had already paid the price for seeking too much power. The Martians had been wiped out, but their legacy, their warning, was still alive. As I sat there staring at the screen, the weight of what I had uncovered settled in. The mission report wasn't just some forgotten relic from a space program. It was the key to something much bigger. A hidden truth that could change everything we thought we knew about life beyond Earth. But who else knew about it? And what would they do to keep it from coming out? But the price was high. The shadow organization came after me, hunting me down, determined to silence me for good. They were relentless, but in the end they couldn't stop me. The truth had been exposed, and the world was beginning to wake up. People were demanding change, demanding accountability. The artifact had been hidden for so long, but now it was gone. Its power sealed away, never to be used again. He paused for a moment, scanning the room, and then slid a small folder across the table to me. "You're not the only one who's been asking questions. The agency has been investigating this for years, but there are forces even higher than us. Forces that we can't control." I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I stepped forward, holding out the documents I had gathered, the evidence that connected the artifact to the conspiracy. "You're the only one who can stop this, Dr. Roper. You're the only one who knows how to control it. The world doesn't even know what's coming." I felt a tightness in my chest. The government wasn't the only threat I was facing. There was someone else working behind the scenes to suppress the truth. I had to find Dr. Roper. but I knew that even if I did, he wouldn't have the answers I was hoping for. He had been part of this global conspiracy. He had been working with the same people who had been manipulating the world for decades. But he was the only person who might still have the information I needed to stop it. I leaned in, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tell me what happened on that mission, Michael. What did they find on Mars?" I leaned over the desk, my heart pounding. The map on the screen showed a series of coordinates, but they didn't match any known locations on Mars. They led to a vast subterranean complex beneath the Martian surface, a place that was previously thought to be nothing more than a crater. The coordinates matched nothing on official maps, and that alone told me how carefully this information had been hidden. I spent days tracking down every possible lead, connecting the dots between Dr. Roper's old associates and a network of scientists who had been involved in classified projects. Finally, I found someone who knew where he was hiding, a former colleague of Dr. Roper's, someone who had worked with him during the early days of the Mars mission. "I was part of the team that managed the artifact's recovery," Anna continued. "I saw it up close. I know what it can do, and I can tell you that it's not just a weapon. It's something more. It's alive in a way we don't fully understand. It's been influencing the people who have been studying it, changing them, controlling them." She picked up the file slowly, reading it over with careful eyes, but then, without warning, she stood up abruptly and left the table. I was confused. What had just happened? Why had she walked away without saying a word? That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just about the artifact itself. It was about what it represented. The government and those secret organizations had been playing with fire, and now they were in too deep. They were using the artifact for their own gain, manipulating it to control governments, economies, and military power. But they had underestimated it. It was far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined, and it was already starting to turn against them. There was silence on the other end, and then Jake finally agreed. All right, but I'm doing this on one condition. You get me out of this if things go sideways." And they were willing to do anything to protect it. As I continued to sift through the files, one document stood out. It was a report from an international summit held a few years ago, detailing the formation of a secret committee, one that had been tasked with overseeing the global research into the artifact. The committee wasn't just concerned with the technology of the artifact. It was concerned with controlling its power. They had developed plans to deploy the artifact's influence in various strategic locations across the globe, using it to manipulate entire populations and bend governments to their will. As I disappeared into the shadows, I couldn't help but wonder if I had done the right thing. Had I made the right choice in destroying the artifact? What would have happened if I had allowed it to remain, exposed to the world? Could we have used it for good, or would it have consumed us as it had the Martians? He glanced at the papers, but his gaze quickly shifted to the artifact, which was resting on a pedestal in the center of the room, glowing faintly. It was as if it was alive, responding to our presence. His eyes darted nervously. "You have no idea what you're asking. It wasn't just alien ruins. They found something else, something that they shouldn't have. The artifact." I felt a shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just a ruin we were talking about anymore. This was a carefully guarded secret, something the government had spent decades erasing from every public record. I followed her, trying to catch up. As I stepped outside, I saw her slipping into a black car waiting at the curb. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what was happening. She hadn't been trying to help me. She had been playing me all along. I had one last chance to get it right. The world couldn't afford to make the same mistake the Martians had. I had to find a way to make sure that the artifact didn't fall into the wrong hands. The fate of humanity depended on it. I had to get to the artifact, but I couldn't do it alone. The government was watching me, and I was already deep in their crosshairs. I needed help. I needed to find a way to get to the Martian ruins and expose the truth about what was really going on. I opened the folder, and inside were several black and white photographs. They were grainy, but they clearly showed the same coordinates from the map I had uncovered, the location of the artifact beneath Mars. What struck me was a series of photos showing high-ranking officials standing near the artifact, overseeing its retrieval. I was about to find out. I will. Just help me get to the truth. Meeting this person wasn't easy. The world around me felt like it was crumbling as I navigated through increasingly dangerous territory, but I managed to arrange a meeting at an old abandoned warehouse just outside the city. It wasn't the safest place, but it was the only option I had. My mind was reeling. "What do you mean, controlling them?" the voice continued. "I'm not asking you to stop, but you need to be careful. If you keep digging, there will be consequences. People like you disappear, and no one will ever know why." A few hours later, we were sitting in his cramped apartment, surrounded by computers and blinking lights. Jake worked quickly, typing furiously as I watched nervously. He cracked into the system and pulled up the transmission logs. As he skimmed through the data, his face grew more and more serious. And as I stood at the edge of a new dawn, the weight of the truth settled over me. The world was about to change. The question was, would it survive? Anna took a deep breath, glancing around nervously. "It's not just the government. The artifact has a power over those who study it, a kind of subtle influence. People who come into contact with it start seeing the world differently. They become obsessed with it, and eventually they'll do anything to keep its power for themselves. They believe that they can unlock its secrets, but the truth is, no one is meant to understand it. It's ancient, and it's dangerous." But the closer I got to the artifact, the more I realized how impossible that was. The government's reach was everywhere. There were already people who had tried to get close and had disappeared without a trace. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "The artifact?" I asked, my heart racing. I looked up at Paul. "So they knew about the artifact all along." I realized that the artifact's power wasn't just about destruction. It was about control. The people who had been studying it had discovered ways to manipulate the minds of entire populations, influencing their thoughts, their actions, and their beliefs. They were using the artifact as a tool to create a new world order, one where they would be the undisputed rulers. I rushed back to my apartment, panic setting in. The truth hit me like a cold slap. Sarah was working for the other side. She had been feeding me false information, making me believe I was getting closer to the truth. But all along she had been pulling the strings, ensuring I went down the wrong path, Jake continued. "I don't know who put this map out there, but it's clear that the artifact is located in a place that no one's been able to get to. The question is, why?" The line went dead before I could respond, and I was left staring at the phone in my hand, wondering what the hell I had gotten myself into. The more I uncovered, the more I realized the gravity of what I was up against. The forces I was fighting weren't just powerful, they were global, coordinated, and deeply embedded in every facet of society. They had been planning this for decades, and now the final stage of their plan was unfolding. The world would never know. The truth had been buried, and the artifact's legacy would remain a mystery. But one thing was certain: humanity had been given a second chance. The path ahead was uncertain, but I had done everything I could to make sure the mistakes of the past wouldn't be repeated. When I arrived, I found myself face to face with someone I didn't expect. A man named Edward Hayes, a former astronaut and an old friend of Dr. Roper's. Edward had been keeping tabs on Dr. Roper for years, but he wasn't about to let anyone, including me, find him without a fight. At first he was reluctant to talk, He didn't trust me, and why should he? Everyone I had been involved with was either dead or missing. The trust between us had been shattered, and Edward knew it. "You don't understand," he repeated, his voice more urgent. "This isn't just about control. It's about survival. The artifact was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to prevent something far worse from happening. The power it holds isn't just for manipulation. It's to protect humanity from an extinction-level event." As I started to piece together the betrayal, I felt a sharp sense of dread creeping over me. Sarah had been a part of their game from the beginning, but I hadn't seen it until it was too late. The worst part? She wasn't just a pawn in this conspiracy. She was one of the architects of the lies. And now I was alone. As the world moved forward, I knew that the echoes of Mars, of the Martian civilization, and of the artifact would always linger in the back of our minds. We would never forget the lessons of the past, and maybe, just maybe, we would be wiser for it. But after a few tense minutes of negotiation, I finally convinced him to tell me where to find Dr. Roper. He gave me a set of coordinates, and with his last words, he offered one final piece of advice. "Be careful. The deeper you go, the more dangerous it gets. Don't trust anyone, not even him." But I couldn't stop now. The truth was out there, and I was the only one who could expose it. I had to get to Dr. Roper and bring everything to light before it was too late. But as I made my way toward the final stage of the journey, I knew one thing for sure. Whoever controlled the artifact controlled the future, and I was about to face them head on. He nodded. It wasn't just a piece of alien technology, it was alive in some way. We didn't understand it at first, but the mission wasn't about finding history, it was about finding power. And the moment they touched that thing, everything changed. He nodded. The government didn't just find it by accident. They've been using the artifact for decades. They've studied it, tested it, and they've been hiding it ever since. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew deep down that the voice wasn't lying. Something far darker was at play here. It wasn't just the government. There was another power, a hidden force that had been working in the shadows for decades, making sure the truth about Mars stayed buried. I leaned back in my chair, trying to piece together everything I had learned. There was no way this map was a coincidence. The government hadn't just tried to cover up the expedition. They had gone to extreme lengths to erase the exact location of the artifact. Why? And what was so dangerous about this place? My blood ran cold. "You're saying the artifact is manipulating them?" My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" That night, as I lay in bed, trying to digest the weight of everything I had learned, I received another message. This time, it was from someone I didn't recognize. A voice on the other end, distorted, as though trying to hide its identity. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. The artifact wasn't just an object of alien origin. It was the key to a global takeover. And if I didn't expose the truth, humanity would fall under the control of a small group of elites who would stop at nothing to maintain their power. "This isn't just a transmission," he muttered. "This is something different. The transmission came from Mars, not from Earth." But as I walked away, the weight of the truth still heavy on my shoulders, I knew one thing for sure. The fight for the future wasn't over. The real battle had only just begun. But as I was piecing together the last bits of the puzzle, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I wasn't alone anymore. The quiet had been unsettling, but now it felt oppressive, suffocating. Someone had been watching me, and I knew I didn't have much time left. Dr. Roper took a deep breath, his eyes flickering toward the artifact. The artifact's true purpose isn't to control people. It's to prevent the catastrophic events that wiped out the Martian civilization. The artifact holds the key to stopping the same thing from happening to us, but in the wrong hands, it could destroy us all. I felt the blood drain from my face. The artifact wasn't just a lost relic. It was a weapon. And it had been in their possession for far longer than I had anticipated. I had been set up, but I didn't have time to wallow in self-pity. The file I had given Sarah contained the very information that could expose the artifact and the government's hidden agenda. And now, it was in their hands. I knew what I had to do next. I had to find that location. I had to go to Mars. I left the warehouse feeling the weight of his warning. I had already made that mistake, but now there was no turning back. Dr. Roper had the answers I needed, and I was going to find him, no matter what it took. It wasn't until a week later that I realized just how deep the conspiracy ran. I had managed to track down another former member of the Mars expedition, a man named Dr. Thomas Roper, who had worked as a technical analyst on the mission. He was reluctant to talk, but after some persuasion he agreed to meet. My heart skipped a beat. Mars? Are you sure? My mind was spinning. What was he talking about? A living artifact? What kind of power could it hold? She nodded grimly. Yes, and it's not just the scientists or government officials. There's an entire faction of people who believe that controlling the artifact will give them ultimate power. Power to reshape the world order, control economies and bend governments to their will. They're willing to do whatever it takes to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. And now, you're on their radar. They know you're getting closer, the voice said, calm and collected. You're running out of time. If you don't stop now, they'll come for you, and they'll take everything. Before I could ask more questions, Michael slammed his hand on the table, looking frantic. You have to stop. The government doesn't want this getting out. People have already started disappearing because of it. Harper was just the first. If you keep digging, you'll be next. I didn't know what I'd be walking into, but I was prepared for whatever came next. The stakes had grown higher than I ever imagined, and I knew the truth was just within reach. But every step I took toward the truth seemed to bring me closer to a force that wanted to destroy me. The government, the shadowy organization, and the artifact itself were all interconnected, and each one was more dangerous than the last. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Who is this? I had one last chance to get to Dr. Roper, but the clock was ticking. I had uncovered a conspiracy that stretched across the globe, and I was running out of time to stop it. I was struck by the weight of her words. The artifact wasn't just an object of study. It was the key to controlling everything. And it was changing the very people who sought to control it. Jake looked at me like I had lost my mind. Are you serious? You want to go there? To that location? It's guarded. The government has the place under lock and key. You'll never make it. Jake nodded grimly. The timestamp matches the day the expedition landed. It wasn't from any Earth-based facility. Whoever sent this, they were on Mars. My mind was reeling. I had been so focused on exposing the conspiracy that I had never considered the possibility that the artifact wasn't just a tool for manipulation, it was a potential savior, Paul continued. There's a group within the government, a shadow organization, that's been pulling the strings. They're not just interested in studying the artifact, they want to use it. And they'll stop at nothing to keep it hidden. We met in a run-down diner on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. Dr. Roper was nervous, constantly glancing around like he expected someone to show up at any moment. With the walls closing in and betrayal hanging over me, I knew I had to make a choice. I could either disappear, try to go underground and save myself, or I could fight. The artifact was too important, the truth too powerful, to let it slip away. Before I could respond, the doors to the facility slammed open. Figures in black suits poured into the room. Agents of the shadow organization who had been controlling everything from behind the scenes. They didn't care about the truth. They cared about keeping the artifact's power for themselves. But the decision wasn't mine to make. The moment Sarah betrayed me, the decision was taken out of my hands. There was no turning back now. I froze, feeling the cold grip of fear tightening around me. What happened to Dr. Harper? I ignored him. I wasn't concerned with the logistics or the danger anymore. I couldn't turn back. I was already in too deep, and everything I had learned pointed to one undeniable fact. The artifact held the key to everything. It wasn't just some lost piece of alien technology. It was the source of whatever had destroyed the Martian civilization. And it could do the same to us. I was no longer just searching for answers. I was fighting for my life and for the future of humanity itself. My mind was racing. The artifact, the Martian ruins, the government cover-up, all of it was starting to make sense. Someone or something on Mars had reached out to the expedition, and they had tried to erase all traces of it. But why? What was the message? And who had sent it? The truth is more dangerous than you realize. You think the artifact is just a weapon. You think it's just some tool for controlling power. But you're wrong. It's not a weapon. It's a key. A key to something much bigger. If you open that door, there's no going back. So, I'm warning you, stop before it's too late. They know, he said in a low voice, barely audible over the hum of the diner's old air conditioner. I shouldn't even be talking to you. You don't know who's listening. Who are they? I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. Why are you helping me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. And as I prepared for what came next, I knew one thing for certain. If I wanted to survive, I had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Anna's expression softened, but there was no warmth in her eyes. Because I was one of them. I worked for them, and I saw what the artifact was doing to people. I got out before it was too late, but not everyone can. I've been trying to find a way to expose the truth, but it's almost impossible. The people who control the artifact are powerful, and they'll stop at nothing to protect it. As I left Jake's apartment, I could feel the gravity of what I was about to undertake. I had no idea how I was going to get to Mars, or what I'd find when I did, but I knew one thing. This was my only chance to uncover the truth. Before I could respond, the line went dead. My mind was racing. The warning wasn't just an empty threat, it was a reality. The artifact was more than just an alien relic. It was a key to something the world wasn't ready for. Dr. Roper turned to face them, but I could see the fear in his eyes. You have no idea what you're doing, he said, his voice trembling. This isn't just about controlling the world, it's about saving it. Michael hesitated for a moment, then whispered, She got too close. She started talking about it, saying the artifact was linked to the fall of the Martian civilization, and when she got too close to the truth, they silenced her. The discovery didn't stop there. As we continued to dig, we uncovered records of a second mission, one that had been erased entirely from public memory. It was scheduled right after the first expedition, but there were no public reports, no mentions of it anywhere. They're the ones who erased the second mission. They're the ones who shut down the Mars program after they found the artifact. And they're the ones who've been manipulating world events for decades, using the knowledge they gained from the artifact to control everything. Economies, politics, even military strategies. Who's listening? I asked, leaning in closer, but I couldn't stop now. The artifact and the truth behind it had the power to change everything. I had to find it, no matter the cost. Whatever was waiting on the other side, I had no choice but to confront it, but the agents didn't listen. They moved quickly, closing in on the artifact and securing the room. I knew I had to make a choice. I could either stand by and let them take the artifact, or I could fight for the truth, for humanity's survival. I could feel the weight of her words. If she was telling the truth, and everything I had uncovered so far pointed to it, then I was in far more danger than I had ever realized. The artifact was influencing people, bending them to its will, turning them into pawns in a larger game. And now, I was tangled in that game. I had no idea how much of a risk I was taking, but there was no turning back. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. But the knowledge, the power that artifact held, was too much to ignore. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. This was no longer just a story. This was something much bigger. Something dangerous. I sat back, stunned by the magnitude of what Paul was saying. The government hadn't just been hiding the truth about the artifact. They had been using it to influence everything we knew. Wars, financial crises, political upheavals. All of it could have been orchestrated by the very people who had their hands on the artifact. The people in charge, he said, his voice shaking. The ones behind the government cover-up. They've been watching this from the beginning. They'll stop at nothing to keep the truth from getting out. What happened to the second mission? I asked, my voice trembling. Anna handed me a folder, much like the one Paul had given me. Inside this folder are the files you need. They'll help you get to the heart of it all. The people behind the cover-up and the plans they have for the artifact. But be careful. They'll come after you if they find out you're onto them. I chose to fight. I needed to know what happened to the Martians. I needed to know what had caused their downfall and what it meant for humanity. I pushed him further, my heart racing. But why? Why keep it a secret? What's so dangerous about the artifact? Jake didn't respond right away, but after a long pause he said, I found something. It's a reference to a debriefing. The second mission found something on Mars. Something so powerful that they had to stop it. They didn't just discover the ruins, they found something hidden beneath them. And whatever it was, it's not just alien. It's far more dangerous than anything we've imagined. Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. If you want the truth, you'll have to go after it yourself. But be careful. There are people watching. Why are you telling me all this? I asked, struggling to process the enormity of the situation. A struggle broke out as I grabbed the papers from Dr. Roper's desk, making a dash for the exit. I wasn't sure how I was going to get out of this, but I knew I had to get the evidence out into the world. The artifact could not remain in the hands of those who would use it for their own gain. Because I can't stand by and watch them destroy everything, Paul said, his voice barely above a whisper. The artifact's power is dangerous, and the people controlling it have no idea what they're dealing with. They think they can harness it, but the artifact doesn't work that way. It's a ticking time bomb, and when it goes off, we won't be ready. He hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer. The artifact isn't just a piece of alien technology. It's a weapon of unimaginable power. And there are groups, some linked to the government, others to private organizations, who want to control it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But deep down, I knew he was right. I had already come too far to back out now. I didn't know what to say. I was overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Anna had just told me. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stop now. The truth was closer than ever, and I had to expose it, no matter the cost. My thoughts were racing. What could be so dangerous that it warranted a complete cover-up, and why was it hidden beneath the ruins? The more I learned, the more I realized that the artifact wasn't just a relic from a lost civilization. It was connected to something far more powerful. Something humanity wasn't ready to understand. That's when I realized it. This wasn't just about uncovering a secret anymore. It was about survival. If the artifact had the power to destroy Mars, what was stopping it from destroying Earth? After our meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and I knew that whatever lay ahead, it would change everything. For better or worse, I was in this too deep to turn back, and if I didn't find it first, who would? I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The artifact wasn't just a key to understanding extraterrestrial life. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, one that had the potential to destroy humanity if it fell into the wrong hands. I felt the blood drain from my face. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about uncovering a lost civilization on Mars. This was about controlling the future of humanity itself. If the artifact could be weaponized, it could shift the balance of power on Earth in ways we couldn't even begin to understand. I fought my way through the facility, but with every step I knew that the truth was slipping through my fingers. The agents were relentless, and I was exhausted, but I kept going, determined to expose the truth. No matter the cost, we weren't just dealing with a cover-up. We were dealing with a force that could change the course of history. And now someone, or something, didn't want that knowledge to get out. You've made the right choice, Anna said quietly, before turning and disappearing into the night. As I left the cafe, I felt a strange sense of resolve. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it, no matter the cost. Finally, after a tense chase, I found myself outside, standing in the cool night air. The documents were in my hands, the evidence I had worked so hard to uncover. I had won this battle, but I knew the war was far from over. I had to keep going, but with every step I could feel the danger closing in. Whoever was behind this was willing to go to any lengths to make sure the truth stayed buried, but now that I knew, I couldn't back down. It was too late. I stood there for a few moments, letting her words sink in. The conspiracy was bigger than I had imagined. There was more at stake than just the artifact. It was about control, power, and the fate of humanity itself. And the forces working to keep it all hidden were more dangerous than I had ever thought. The government isn't just trying to suppress the truth, Dr. Roper continued. They're trying to harness the power of the artifact. They're experimenting with it, trying to figure out how to use it, but they don't fully understand it. And that's the real danger. Whoever controls it will control everything. They've been using it to manipulate the world's governments, Paul, I said, my voice trembling. What if it gets out? What if the public finds out? I had no choice but to continue. But I wasn't just up against the government anymore. I was up against something far more insidious. And I had no idea just how deep it went. I stared at him, trying to process the gravity of what he was saying. A weapon. That was why they'd kept it hidden. That was why people had died. And now I was in the crosshairs. Jake looked at me, his face pale. You're not going to stop, Paul shook his head. If the truth comes out, it'll be chaos. The world won't be able to handle it. That's why they've been silencing anyone who gets too close to the truth. If you continue down this path, they won't stop until they silence you too. The artifact, with all its power, was still out there, waiting to be controlled. And the fight for the future of humanity was just beginning. I knew he was right, but I couldn't turn back. Not now. The truth needed to be exposed, no matter the cost. I shook my head. No, I can't. They won't stop. Dr. Roper whispered, his voice trembling. And neither will you. As I left the bar that night, the weight of Paul's words hung heavy in the air. The government had been hiding the artifact for decades, but they weren't the only ones who wanted it. There were other forces at play, people who had been using the artifact's power to shape the world in their image. And now, They would stop at nothing to keep it from being exposed. Before I could ask any more questions, he stood up abruptly and rushed out of the diner, leaving me with a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew one thing for sure now. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous this story became. And whatever was coming next, I wasn't sure I'd be able to survive it, but I couldn't turn back. The truth was out there, and it was more terrifying than I ever could have imagined. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. But the truth was out there, and I wasn't about to let anyone hide it any longer. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into something far deeper than I had anticipated. The warning message had shaken me, but it also solidified my determination. Many someones didn't want me to get any closer to the artifact, to the truth. That meant I was on the right path. I had no idea who the man was or who was backing him, but I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't the only one. That realization hit me hard, and the fear I felt before turned into something else. Resolve. If I was going to uncover the truth, I had to push forward. There was no going back now, not with the stakes as high as they were. I knew the decision I had made would haunt me. As I left the temple behind, I could feel the weight of the artifact's power still lingering inside me, its presence like a shadow I couldn't shake. The truth was no longer an abstract concept. It was something I was living with every moment in every breath. And as I walked through the streets of Cusco, the consequences of my choice started to settle in. I ran through the narrow streets of Cusco, my heart hammering in my chest, every footstep echoing in the night air. Gabriel's betrayal burned in my mind like a fire, and the weight of his words was still fresh in my ears. It wasn't just about the artifact anymore. It was about survival. I couldn't let him or whoever else was behind this stop me. I had come too far to turn back now. I stood in the open air, the temple behind me, but it felt as if I was still inside it, surrounded by shadows and whispers. The wind stirred, but it wasn't enough to shake the feeling that something was following me. The artifact's power still lingered in my mind, pulling at my thoughts, shaping my perceptions. It was no longer a choice of whether to find the truth or not. It was a question of what I would do with it now that I had it. I was shaken, but the encounter in the temple had revealed something crucial. The artifact wasn't just an object. It was a living, breathing entity. It could manipulate the world around it, distort reality, and control minds. The more I learned about it, the more I realized that what I was dealing with wasn't just a discovery of the past. It was a force that could rewrite the future. It was a day like any other, when I first stumbled across the manuscript that would change everything. I never expected my life to veer off course in such a dramatic way, but then again, nothing could prepare me for what I was about to uncover. I'm Dr. Evelyn Moore, a historian specializing in ancient civilizations, and I've always believed that history holds secrets waiting to be unlocked. Secrets that can change the way we see the world. Little did I know that this belief would soon plunge me into a web of mystery, danger, and a truth that could shatter everything we think we know about humanity. The days that followed Lewis's warning were a blur, but there was one thing that kept me grounded: the symbol. Every waking moment was consumed with it. The intricate pattern from Dr. Carrington's journal, the symbol that had appeared in the temple and in the deepest corners of my research. It was more than just a design. It was a key to unlocking the final secret of the artifact, its true purpose. The journal I found in Dr. Carrington's office was like a door that had been waiting for me to open it. The moment I flipped through the pages, everything clicked into place. His notes were filled with observations about ancient cultures, cryptic references to the artifact, and theories about its influence on human consciousness. But the most important part of the journal was a set of coordinates that pointed to the exact location of the Temple of the Fallen Sun. The journey to the coordinates took me deeper into the Peruvian mountains than I had ever imagined. The trek was grueling, and the further I went, the more the sense of unease grew. It wasn't just the isolation. It was something else, something far more dangerous. Every turn I took, I felt as though I was being followed, whether it was the crackling of the branches underfoot or the strange shadows that darted across the rocky paths. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The moment I stepped away from the pedestal, I realized that the world around me had shifted. The air felt heavier, thick with the knowledge that had been poured into my mind. The visions, the truth that the artifact had shown me, had left a mark on me, an imprint I couldn't escape. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, but I knew that I couldn't return to my old life. The artifact had changed everything, and I was forever bound to its influence. The next few days were a blur of confusion and dread. The temple had revealed its secrets, but it had also introduced a new layer of danger. The man who had confronted me in the chamber, whoever he was, had made it clear that I was on their radar. The artifact was no longer just an object of historical curiosity, it was a weapon, and I had no idea who or what I was up against. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the manuscript and the fragment of a clue it had offered me. The more I pondered it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just some ancient legend. It was a map, a real physical map leading to an artifact that had the potential to change everything we knew about the human mind. But the question was, why had it been hidden? Who had been trying to erase all knowledge of it? The plan was set in motion. Dr. Vasquez and I spent the next few days making contact with the remaining members of Dr. Carrington's circle. Each one of them had been involved in the research surrounding the artifact, and each one had their own reasons for staying hidden. Some were frightened, others were reluctant, but all of them had seen the dangers of what we were dealing with. The trip to Peru came much faster than I expected. I had managed to gather enough information to confirm that the location was real, or at least that it was supposed to be. But what I hadn't expected was how quickly I would be dragged into something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. My excitement to uncover the artifact's location quickly turned into a tense, nerve-wracking journey. As soon as I arrived in Cusco, I felt the weight of something watching me. The city was bustling, tourists everywhere, yet I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. After all, I was on a wild adventure. But as the days went on, it became clear that something wasn't right. Every turn I took, I felt eyes on me. I would catch glimpses of people standing in the shadows, just watching, always too distant to engage, but never far enough to be unnoticed. But I couldn't let it control me. I had come too far to back down now. I had to understand it, unlock its secrets, and find a way to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. My mind was racing as I walked out of the temple, every step heavy with the weight of what I had just experienced. But the closer I got to understanding the artifact, the more confusing and dangerous it became. The journal, Dr. Carrington's research, and everything I had uncovered in the temple pointed to one undeniable fact. The artifact was no ordinary object. It was alive. But with each step I took toward understanding, I began to feel the artifact's influence growing stronger. It was subtle at first. Small things, like the way I would lose track of time or feel a strange disconnection from reality. It was as though the lines between what was real and what was not were beginning to blur. Every step I took felt heavier, as if the weight of my decision was growing by the minute. I knew the world couldn't go on as it had. The knowledge I'd gained wasn't just a piece of ancient history. It was a new beginning, a beginning that had the potential to change everything. But that change could be catastrophic. The artifact wasn't just a tool to be studied or harnessed. It was a force. It could shape reality, manipulate minds, and rewrite history. The danger was unimaginable, but the possibility of progress was equally vast. I couldn't believe it. Dr. Carrington had been so close. He had uncovered everything I had found, and more, but he hadn't been able to complete the final step. He had been chasing the same truth I had, and now, it seemed, he had disappeared because of it. His journal gave me the courage to push forward, but it also left me with a haunting question. What had happened to him? I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't shoulder the responsibility of the artifact's power by myself. I had seen what it was capable of, and I knew that if I kept it to myself, I would be swallowed by its influence. I needed help. I needed others who could help me harness its power, who could stand by my side when the forces who sought to control it came for us. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something didn't want this truth to see the light of day. The deeper I looked, the more my doubts grew. I spent hours poring over the manuscript, focusing on the one part that intrigued me the most, a strange diagram that seemed to show the artifact's location. It was a series of symbols, some familiar, some I had never seen before, leading to a small town in the remote mountains. The coordinates weren't precise, but I could tell this was no coincidence. I had no idea where I was going. The streets of Cusco twisted like a maze, but I knew I had to get away, put as much distance between myself and Gabriel as possible. I didn't know who else might be working with him or who was watching me, but I could feel their eyes even from the shadows. Every corner I turned, every alley I passed, I felt like I was being followed. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of searching and questioning. The manuscript was gone, but the map, the artifact, the clues, they were still with me, burned into my memory. I couldn't just let it slip away. I had to find another way. That was when I decided to go back to the basics, to research the history and the symbols I had found before. If the manuscript was gone, maybe the answers weren't as far away as I thought. I stood there in the temple trying to regain my bearings. The walls felt as if they were closing in, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than before. The artifact wasn't just a piece of ancient history. It was the key to a new reality, one that I had unlocked with a simple touch. But the truth came with a price, a cost I hadn't fully understood until now. It all started in the dusty, dimly lit corner of a library I'd visited 100 times before. I had just finished reviewing some old scrolls from the 15th century when a peculiar leather-bound book caught my eye. It wasn't like the others. It felt different. As I reached for it, a chill ran down my spine, though I couldn't quite explain why. The book seemed out of place, almost as though it had been waiting for someone to find it. Louise had been right. The Guardians, or whatever force they were, weren't just a myth. I felt them watching me, waiting. But I had come too far to turn back now. I had uncovered too much. Louise had disappeared. The guide who had initially warned me about the Guardians had been unreachable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he had let on. I was starting to doubt everyone around me. Was I being used? Had I misjudged the people I thought I could trust? We had to work quickly. The more we moved, the more we could feel the threat closing in on us. The forces that had been watching us from the shadows were already beginning to track our movements. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted. Not just by the people who wanted the artifact, but by the artifact itself. Its influence on my mind had only grown stronger, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist. But finding allies wouldn't be easy. The conspiracy that had been guarding the artifact for centuries was vast and hidden in the shadows. They were everywhere. People in positions of power, with their own agendas, willing to do anything to control what I had uncovered. They wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who stood in their way. Every theory, every myth, and every bit of history that had been suppressed for centuries had one thing in common: the artifact's mind-altering power. I had believed that the artifact was just a tool, something that could be used by those who understood its mechanics. But now, I was starting to see it differently. It wasn't just a device. It was an entity, a sentient being capable of manipulating minds. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The artifact wasn't just a tool or a weapon. It was alive, and it was speaking to me, weaving its influence into my thoughts, my decisions. It wanted me to follow it, to give in to its power. I couldn't ignore the voice anymore. The artifact had spoken to me. I had heard it, felt it inside my mind, and it was clear that it didn't want me to uncover the truth. But why? What was it hiding? And what did it want with me? I had contacted a local guide, someone who had worked in the area for years. His name was Louise, and while he was experienced, he also had an air of caution about him. When we first met, he made it clear that the route to the Temple of the Fallen Sun was dangerous, not because of the terrain or wildlife, but because of the people who watched over it. He called them the Guardians, a group of unknown individuals who, according to local legend, had protected the temple and its secrets for centuries. I had never felt more alone than I did in that moment. The world was full of enemies, those who sought to control the artifact's power, those who would destroy it to keep their grip on the status quo, and those who were still in the dark, unaware of the forces at play. But there was no one left I could trust. Not after Gabriel's betrayal. Not after everything I had uncovered. I was alone with the artifact, and that meant I had to make a decision. I had to keep moving. I knew I couldn't keep going alone. The danger was escalating, and I needed someone who could help me navigate the growing web of conspiracy and cover-up. That's when I reached out to Gabrielle, an old friend and colleague from my university days. Gabrielle was a cryptographer, specializing in ancient languages, and he had helped me crack some of the more obscure texts in Dr. Carrington's journal. I trusted him, but there was a part of me that wondered if I was making a mistake by involving him. I needed answers. I knew I couldn't do this alone, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I might not be able to trust anyone. It seemed that the forces trying to suppress the truth were everywhere. Dr. Carrington's disappearance had confirmed that this was bigger than any one person, bigger than any single country or organization. The artifact, the power it contained. It was a secret that had been guarded for millennia by those who feared its potential. I started digging into historical texts, looking for any mention of the Temple of the Fallen Sun, the artifact, or even anything related to consciousness-altering objects throughout history. There had to be something, and there was. My search led me to old journals from explorers who had ventured into the mountains of Peru centuries ago, all of them detailing strange happenings, dangerous encounters, and hints of ancient technologies far beyond their time. I found mentions of an object capable of manipulating the human mind, but every reference was cryptic, as if the writers had been afraid to say too much. I'd never been to Peru, but I knew I had to go. I had to see this for myself. There was something pulling me to that place, as if the universe had drawn a line that only I could follow. But I wasn't the only one who had noticed this artifact's significance. I was starting to realize that there were forces out there that would stop at nothing to keep this knowledge buried. Louise's warning continued to echo in my mind. You've gone too far. Was he right? Had I really crossed a line that couldn't be undone? I had seen what the artifact could do, its power to control, to manipulate, and it frightened me. But at the same time, I knew that there was no turning back. We had to control it before someone else did. Opening it, I discovered that the pages weren't like normal paper. They had an aged, almost brittle texture, yet they held an unmistakable energy. The language wasn't familiar either, but somehow I could decipher it. Just enough to see that this wasn't any ordinary manuscript. The symbols etched across the pages were unlike anything I had seen in my research on ancient languages. Some looked like hieroglyphs, while others seemed entirely new. Alien, even. The knowledge had been overwhelming. The artifact had shown me glimpses of the future, terrifying visions of a world where minds were controlled, where reality itself could be manipulated. I had seen what humanity could become if this power fell into the wrong hands. I had witnessed wars fought not with weapons but with thoughts, with ideas. The potential for chaos, for destruction was limitless. When I finally arrived at the site, I was struck by its eerie silence. The temple, if you could even call it that, was more of a structure, half buried under centuries of dirt and stone, as though the earth itself was trying to swallow it up. The entrance was narrow, hidden beneath a thick layer of vines, but it was unmistakable. There was no mistaking the carvings on the stones. It was the same symbol I had seen in Dr. Carrington's journal, the one that had haunted my dream since I first discovered it, the mark of the artifact. But what was I really chasing? The truth? Or just a fantasy created by the artifact itself? I began making preparations. The first step was getting a better understanding of the location mentioned in the manuscript. A place called the Temple of the Fallen Sun kept popping up in old legends, an ancient structure that was said to be the key to unlocking the artifact's power. I had read about it before, in passing, but I hadn't given it much thought. Now, it was central to everything. I couldn't shake the images from the temple, the swirling patterns in the orb, the way the air had seemed to vibrate with energy. It was as though the artifact itself was alive, reaching out, pulling at my thoughts. I had felt it in the chamber, a presence that lingered just behind my thoughts, as if the artifact was aware of me, aware of what I was trying to do. I didn't have much time to waste. The more I read, the more I realized that the artifact wasn't just a relic of the past. It was an active force. According to Dr. Carrington's research, the artifact could interact with the mind, altering perceptions and even memories. It could change the way people thought, see the world, and ultimately control how they acted. This wasn't just an ancient treasure, it was a weapon of immense power. I knew I couldn't let that happen. The artifact had chosen me, but it hadn't given me a choice. It was like a parasite, burrowing into my mind, changing my thoughts, reshaping my very essence. I couldn't undo what had been done. The truth I had uncovered was too powerful to ignore, too dangerous to leave unchecked. I spent hours hunched over the pages, my mind racing as I pieced together the cryptic code. At first I thought it was simply a collection of mystical writings or perhaps a forgotten myth, but as I deciphered more, the story became clearer and more dangerous. The manuscript contained references to an artifact, an object said to possess unimaginable power. According to the text, this artifact could alter human consciousness itself. I started to understand why. The more I read, the more I realized that the artifact wasn't just a historical curiosity. It was something much more. It was tied to the very fabric of human consciousness. The idea that this object could alter perception, enhance or even control the way people think was too dangerous to allow the public to know. That's why the artifact had been buried, hidden away, and protected by groups who had seen its potential for what it was. Power. I stepped forward cautiously, feeling every inch of the air around me growing heavier. I could almost hear the hum of energy coming from the stone, the quiet whisper of something ancient calling to me. I thought back to everything I had learned, the ancient civilizations that had worshipped the artifact, the groups that had hidden it away, the people who had died trying to protect it. The warnings had been clear. The artifact's power was not to be trifled with. And yet, I had touched it. I had unlocked its secrets, and now it was a part of me. I couldn't undo that no matter how much I wanted to. Luis's words echoed in my mind. "You've gone too far," he had warned me, but it was too late to turn back. The knowledge had already taken root, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to move forward, but this time, I needed a plan. I needed people who understood the weight of the decision we were facing, who would fight for the truth, no matter the cost. My only option was to find out more. The next step was clear. I needed to find Dr. Carrington, or what was left of him. I had to understand why he had been so obsessed with the artifact, and why he had been silenced. If anyone had answers, it would be him, and if he wasn't alive anymore, well, there had to be a reason why he had left behind the journal, the coordinates, the clues. Our first real breakthrough came when we located Dr. Carrington's last known location, a secluded villa in the foothills of the Andes, hidden away from the prying eyes of the world. It was the perfect place to conduct the kind of research he had been involved in, but it was also where we would find the next piece of the puzzle. Dr. Carrington had been close to unlocking the full potential of the artifact, and his notes, hidden in the villa, would hold the answers we needed. "The artifact is not for you to find, Senora," Luis warned, his face pale, his voice shaky. "Some things are meant to stay buried. The Guardians will never let you get close." The next few hours were a blur. Me racing through the streets, ducking into shops and alleyways, always looking over my shoulder. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Gabriel had been the last person I thought would betray me, and now I had no one to rely on. When he arrived in Cusco, he seemed different, nervous, unsure. We met at a small cafe near the town square. As I briefed him on everything that had happened so far, I noticed a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Gabriel was always the level-headed one, the one who never got rattled, but now there was something about him that made me uneasy. "Are you sure you want to keep going with this?" he asked quietly, his voice low and filled with concern. "I mean, it's not just about history anymore, Evelyn. These people, whoever they are, they're not going to let you walk away from this. It's not just about knowledge, it's about control." As I continued studying his journal, one entry stood out to me. It was dated just a few weeks before his disappearance. Dr. Carrington had written about an unsettling discovery. He believed that the artifact was sentient, capable of influencing the minds of those around it. The idea that something so ancient, so powerful, could have a mind of its own was terrifying, but it also explained everything. As I entered the darkened chamber, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath, and the walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The carvings along the walls told a story of a lost civilization, one that had worshipped the artifact as a god, a being of immense power capable of shaping reality itself. It was all there in the symbols and glyphs, but the story was incomplete. There was something missing, something that wasn't shown in the records, something hidden deeper within the temple. But even with all the historical data, I needed more. I needed something concrete. That's when I remembered Dr. Carrington. He was a renowned archaeologist with connections all over the world, and he had always been one step ahead of me when it came to obscure artifacts and lost civilizations. I had to go to him. Maybe he had more information or could point me in the right direction, but I also knew that I couldn't stop now. I had come this far and the world couldn't remain the same. The artifact held the key to unlocking a new era of human potential, but it could just as easily be the catalyst for humanity's destruction. I had to decide. Would I use the knowledge I had gained to protect the world, or would I let it slip into the hands of those who sought to control it? By the time I made it back to my room at the small inn, it was almost dawn. My body was exhausted, and my mind was spinning with the realization of just how deep I was in. Gabriel had been a part of something much bigger than I could have ever anticipated. He wasn't just an ally. I had made him my enemy, and that meant everything had changed. I had two choices. I could use the artifact's power, harness it to reshape the world, or I could destroy it, bury it deep where no one could ever find it again. Either choice was fraught with danger, but one would allow the world to move forward. The other would keep it locked in a cycle of ignorance and suppression. I pulled up maps of Peru, searched historical records, and contacted a few colleagues who might know something about the area. To my surprise, no one seemed to have much concrete information. It was as if the temple had never existed. In fact, most records about it seemed deliberately vague. I could sense that I was treading into dangerous waters, but I couldn't stop myself. The more I dug, the more questions arose. I reached out to the few contacts I still had, those who I thought might still be trustworthy. Gabriel, despite his betrayal, had always been brilliant, and I wasn't ready to write him off just yet. I needed to understand what had made him turn against me. Was he truly an enemy? Or was he simply another pawn in a much larger game? I thought he was just a superstitious man, afraid of myths and tales. But when I told him that I had already uncovered the coordinates and had proof the artifact existed, his expression turned from fear to something darker, recognition. It wasn't fear anymore, it was something more. It was something more personal. Now I had to know more. As a historian, I was used to uncovering forgotten stories from the past, but this was different. This wasn't just a story, it was a revelation. I felt a strange sense of urgency wash over me, as if the artifact was calling out to be found. The more I read, the more I realized that this artifact wasn't just an object. It was a force. One that had been hidden for millennia, buried by those who feared its power. That night, after receiving the cryptic message, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, connecting dots, remembering things I had read in Dr. Carrington's journal. The sentient nature of the artifact wasn't just speculation, it was real, and if I didn't understand it, I might be the next one to fall under its influence. The journey had taken a toll on me physically and emotionally, but I couldn't stop. The artifact was waiting for someone to unlock its full potential, and it wasn't going to be anyone else. It had chosen me, whether I wanted it or not. The more I studied the symbol, the more I realized that the artifact wasn't just about human consciousness. It was about the collective mind. It had the power to reshape the very fabric of reality, to bend human perception in ways I had never imagined. And with each new discovery, I felt myself slipping further into its grasp. The lines between what I was discovering and what the artifact wanted me to believe were fading. And I wasn't sure if I could tell the difference anymore. We arrived late one evening just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. The villa was quiet, almost too quiet, and as we approached the door I felt that familiar chill of being watched. We had no time to waste. I kicked the door open, my heart racing as I stepped inside. The place looked abandoned, but there was an eerie sense that we weren't alone. As I began reaching out to those I trusted, I also made a plan to seek out Dr. Carrington's remaining colleagues. The archaeologist's journal had pointed me towards several other experts in the field, people who had worked with him before. If they knew what had happened to him, they might also know more about the artifact. Together they could help me understand its true purpose and whether there was a way to control its power before it consumed us all. Dr. Vasquez and I moved quickly, searching through the rooms, finding nothing but dust and cobwebs. But as we reached the study, I felt a presence, like an invisible weight in the air. The room was colder than the rest of the villa, and I could hear my own breath echoing in the silence. I decided to go back to the one place where I might find answers, the chamber beneath the temple. I couldn't explain why, but I felt that the artifact was calling me back. There was more to learn, more pieces of the puzzle that I hadn't uncovered. It wasn't just about finding the artifact anymore. It was about understanding it, controlling it, or at least figuring out how to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. I flew to London, hoping he could help me, but when I arrived at his office, I was met with something that sent a chill down my spine. The door was slightly ajar, and the office looked ransacked. Books were thrown about, drawers were open, and papers were scattered everywhere. It was as though someone had been searching for something important. I had to see it through, though. The artifact held the key to a new reality, one that could either liberate humanity or enslave it. And I couldn't just leave it in the hands of those who wanted to control it. I had to uncover its full potential and unlock the power it promised before anyone else did. I moved deeper into the chamber, feeling a strange pull guiding me toward the center. The closer I got, the more my head ached, as if something was trying to invade my thoughts. I stumbled, caught myself against the wall, and then saw it. A pedestal, set in the middle of the room, bathed in an unnatural glow. Atop it sat the artifact. I reached out to a former mentor, Dr. Isaac Carrington, an archaeologist who had done extensive research in South America. I trusted him, but I also knew he was someone who understood the importance of keeping certain truths hidden. When I told him about my discovery, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then his voice came through, low and serious. I returned to the small town near the temple, hoping to find more clues or information that could lead me to the next step. I needed a place to think, to plan, and the local library seemed as good a place as any. As I sat at one of the desks, I opened Dr. Carrington's journal again. His notes about the artifact's sentient nature kept repeating in my mind. It could influence thoughts. It could alter the way people perceive reality. I tried to reassure him. I have to find out the truth, Gabriel. The artifact, it's not just a relic, it's something far more powerful. If we don't stop this, the consequences could be catastrophic. I turned toward the exit, my steps slow and deliberate. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like a physical force. I couldn't do this alone. The truth was too dangerous to be kept secret. I needed help, but I didn't know who I could trust anymore. Luis's warning echoed in my mind, but I couldn't go back now. The world had changed, and I had to act before it was too late. If the artifact was sentient, then it wasn't just a tool to be uncovered. It was a being with its own intentions, and that meant the people who had been protecting it weren't just guarding an object. They were protecting humanity from something that could manipulate and control our very thoughts. Luis hesitated, then leaned in closer. There are people who will kill to keep this secret. You don't know what you're dealing with, and you don't want to. Leave now. Go back to your life while you still can. The journal, the clues, the artifact, they were still the key. But now I was being hunted, and every move I made seemed to be watched. Gabriel hadn't just betrayed me for personal gain. He was working for an organization that wanted to control the knowledge of the artifact, and they would stop at nothing to make sure no one uncovered its secrets. The text hinted at a secret society that had spent centuries protecting the artifact's location. They weren't just keeping it safe, they were actively suppressing any knowledge of its existence. And as I read, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't meant to uncover this truth. But what choice did I have? The secrets of the past had always intrigued me. But this was something else entirely. The truth, I realized, wasn't just about the artifact. It was about what humanity would become in the face of such power. If I destroyed it, I would be condemning the world to a future of stagnation, of missed potential. But if I used it, if I allowed the artifact's power to reshape the world, there was no knowing what might happen. Would it liberate humanity, or would it enslave us? And then I saw it. As I emerged from the temple, the sky seemed darker than before. The clouds swirled above me in unnatural patterns, and the air felt charged with a strange energy. It was as though the artifact's influence had spread beyond the temple, seeping into the world around me. I could feel it, this invisible force, pulling at my thoughts, shaping the reality I had once known. But deep down I knew he was right. The stakes had grown far beyond anything I had anticipated. The people who were after the artifact weren't just trying to suppress the truth. They were trying to control the future. And if they succeeded, the world as we knew it would change forever. But there was no turning back. I was already too deep, and the moment he said those words, I realized I wasn't just looking for an artifact anymore. I was uncovering a global conspiracy, one that went far beyond anything I could have imagined. The Guardians were not just local protectors, they were part of a much larger force, an ancient society that spanned the globe, dedicated to suppressing the truth about this artifact. Dr. Carrington's office was always organized, almost obsessively so. He had been meticulous about his work, and I knew something was terribly wrong. My heart raced as I called his phone, but there was no answer. My thoughts were spinning. Was he in danger? Was this connected to what I was looking for? I arranged for a guide to take me back to the temple. This time, I wasn't going to go in blind. I had a plan. Armed with new knowledge and a sense of urgency, I would approach the artifact with more caution, more respect. I couldn't let myself be swayed by its power, no matter how tempting it was. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I thought about the visions I had seen, the future I had glimpsed through the artifact's power. A future where humanity's potential was realized, where minds were no longer bound by limitations, where reality itself could be shaped by our thoughts. It was a vision of hope, but also of fear. The potential for greatness was there, but so was the potential for chaos. I decided to return to the temple, back to the place where it all began. I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers were waiting for me there, that the final truth was hidden within the walls of that ancient structure. As I made my way back to the mountain, my thoughts were consumed by one question. Was I ready for the truth? I had to understand it. I had to find a way to use it, control it before it controlled me. I knew I couldn't stay in Cusco any longer. It was too dangerous. I needed to get out, find the artifact and expose the conspiracy for what it was. But how? The coordinates in Dr. Carrington's journal had been the only solid lead I had, and I was certain they were leading me toward the truth. I had to trust the clues. I had to trust that they were real. I knew I had to dig deeper. I couldn't walk away from this. No historian could. But as the night wore on, I felt a growing sense of unease. Something about the manuscript didn't sit right with me. It was as if it was pulling me into something much larger than I had ever anticipated. Something dangerous. It wasn't long before I met with one of Dr. Carrington's colleagues, Dr. Amara Vasquez. She had been a close friend and collaborator, and I hoped she might know something that could help. We met in a quiet cafe tucked away from the crowds. She greeted me cautiously, but there was an understanding in her eyes. She knew I wasn't the same Evelyn Moore who had walked into the temple months ago. It wasn't what I had expected. It didn't look like a relic or an ancient tool. It was an orb, smooth and black, reflecting the dim light in odd, shifting patterns. As I stepped closer, I felt a surge of energy, faint but undeniable. The artifact was alive, and it was waiting for me. This realization hit me like a tidal wave. I wasn't just trying to find an artifact. I was dealing with something that could change everything, and if I didn't act fast, the same people who had been suppressing this knowledge for centuries would stop at nothing to make sure I didn't get any closer. You don't know what you're getting into, Evelyn. This artifact you're after, it's not just a thing. It's not something anyone can control. And if you go looking for it, you'll be playing into hands far older and more dangerous than you can imagine. As I closed the book, the weight of what I had just discovered sank in. I had unearthed a truth that had been deliberately hidden for centuries. I had found a map not just to an ancient artifact, but to a reality that had been kept from humanity, and now there was no turning back. As I flipped through the pages, I found something new, a symbol, one I hadn't noticed before. It was etched into the margins of one of the pages, hidden beneath layers of annotations. It wasn't just a random drawing. It was the same symbol I had seen in the temple, the one that had been engraved on the pedestal. But just as I started to pack, my phone buzzed. I froze. Gabriel agreed to help me, but the uneasy feeling in my gut only grew stronger. I had hoped that he would be the ally I needed, but there was something in his demeanor that made me question his loyalty. His warning didn't discourage me. If anything, it strengthened my resolve, but his words stayed with me. Who were these people he was talking about? And why was he so afraid of a piece of history? I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stop now. The knowledge I had gained, the power I had unlocked, was too dangerous to let slip away. The artifact wasn't just a tool, it was a force, and now it was in my hands. I packed my bags and headed to the coordinates, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every step I took felt like I was walking into a trap, and yet I couldn't turn back now. The truth was just within reach, and I was determined to find it, no matter the cost. I took a deep breath, making my decision. I couldn't destroy the artifact, not when I knew what it could bring to the world, but I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands either. I had to protect it, control it, until I could find a way to unlock its full potential safely. I couldn't be the one to wield its power alone. It didn't take long for me to realize that whatever Dr. Carrington had known or was starting to uncover had put him in danger. He had become part of the conspiracy I was slowly piecing together. The more I thought about it, the more I understood. There were forces at play, people willing to do whatever it took to protect the secret, and I had just walked straight into the middle of it all. "I've been following your progress," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice low. "Dr. Carrington, we were all very concerned, but I didn't think you would actually uncover it." My hands trembled as I reached out to touch it, the air humming louder now, the whispers in my mind growing stronger. But before I could make contact, I heard a noise behind me. Footsteps. Someone was in the temple with me. On the desk, illuminated by the fading light, was Dr. Carrington's journal. It was open to the last page, and there, scrawled in his familiar handwriting, was a message. "It's too late. They know. They've been watching us. If you're reading this, they're already here." That night, I stayed at a small inn in Cusco, feeling the weight of the warning pressing on me. But when I opened my bag to review the manuscript one last time, my heart stopped. The map was gone. The pages that had once detailed the coordinates to the temple had vanished. The closer I got to the temple, the stronger the pull became. It was as though the very air around me was charged with the artifact's power. I had to force myself to stay focused. I couldn't let the artifact's influence take over completely. When I arrived, the temple felt different. The air was thick with tension, as if the place itself was aware of my return. The entrance was as it had been before, covered in vines, almost as if it had been waiting for me. But this time, something was off. There was no light in the sky, the sun was hidden behind clouds, and the stillness felt wrong, oppressive. It was as though the artifact itself had begun to exert its influence on the world around it. I felt my blood run cold. It was as though Dr. Carrington had known what would happen, that his research would lead to this very moment. The forces that had been hiding in the shadows were closing in. And now, I realized that there was no longer any distinction between those who sought the artifact and the artifact itself. They were one and the same. I had to decide how to use it, or whether to destroy it entirely. But I knew that either choice would come at a cost. The world would never be the same again. I had to keep going, but now I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I left my apartment, I felt eyes on me, people I didn't recognize. I began to notice strange things, small details that seemed insignificant, but I knew something was off. I was starting to feel like a character in one of the conspiracy theories I'd spent my career researching. I spent the next few days combing through the remains of his office, hoping to find something that could help me. And then, tucked away in a locked drawer, I found it. A journal, worn and old, just like the manuscript I had first uncovered. Inside, there were detailed notes about the artifact, about the mind-altering abilities, and about the secret society Dr. Carrington had been investigating. I traced the symbol with my finger, a chill running down my spine. There was a connection, a deeper link to the artifact than I had realized. I was on the right path, but I had to figure out how to decode this new clue. I turned, heart racing, but saw nothing. The darkness seemed to shift, shadows stretching unnaturally. Then, the temperature dropped even further, and a cold voice echoed through the chamber. It was a message from an unknown number. You don't know what you're dealing with. Don't come any closer to the truth. You'll regret it. Panic surged through me. I searched my bag, turned the room upside down, but it was as if the manuscript had never existed. Had I imagined it all? No. The clues, the maps, they were real. But now, they were gone. That night, after we had gone over the latest clues I had uncovered from Dr. Carrington's journal, I went to bed exhausted but determined to move forward. But just before I fell asleep, I heard something. Footsteps outside my door. It was late, and I had expected the place to be quiet. My heart raced as I slowly got up, inching toward the door. I tried to ignore the growing sense of dread that gripped me. The artifact's power wasn't meant for a single person to control. It was meant for humanity. But it had to be handled carefully, with wisdom and with the right intentions. And for that, I needed to find others who could help me. I couldn't do it alone, but I knew I couldn't keep running from it either. The moment I stepped inside the temple, the temperature dropped. The walls, once so familiar, now seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. The dark shadows in the corners of the room stretched further, the whispers in the air growing louder, more insistent. The path ahead was treacherous, filled with more uncertainty than ever. But the first major discovery was made. The artifact was real, it was sentient, and it was waiting to be found. The story had begun, and I was at the center of it. I had no idea where this path would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change forever. When I finally arrived at the temple, I stood before it, my heart racing. The entrance was just as it had been before, dark, quiet, and full of secrets. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I stepped inside. the walls of the temple closing in around me like an embrace. "Why?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Why were you all so worried?" And neither would I. I contacted Luis immediately, hoping for answers, but he wasn't picking up. As I walked down the street searching for anyone who might have seen something, a man in a dark suit approached me. He wasn't someone I recognized, but his eyes held a cold, calculating look. I made my way back to Cusco, my mind made up. The artifact was still with me, buried deep in my thoughts, its influence threading through my consciousness. But I would find a way to protect it. I would find a way to use it, not for personal gain, but for the betterment of the world. I had seen the future, and it was a future worth fighting for. I moved toward the pedestal, the artifact still resting atop it, its smooth black surface reflecting the dim light of the chamber. I reached out to touch it, hesitated, and then slowly, cautiously made contact. I opened the door just a crack and peered into the hallway. To my shock, Gabriel was standing there, facing away from me. He hadn't knocked, and there was something odd about the way he was standing. Then, without warning, he turned. I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face. It wasn't Gabriel. The message was different, more threatening, more direct. It was someone else. Someone who knew exactly what I was doing and didn't want me to succeed. My gut tightened. The game had changed. I walked to the pedestal where the artifact sat waiting. It seemed almost alive. The surface shimmered, reflecting the light in strange hypnotic patterns. I reached out to touch it again, but this time I hesitated. The pull was stronger than ever, but I knew that I had to resist its influence. If I gave in now, I might never come back. It wasn't just about finding the artifact anymore. It was about understanding it. There was something in these symbols, something in these clues that could unlock its power and maybe, just maybe, give me a way to control it. But the further I went, the more I realized that I wasn't just seeking an artifact anymore. I was seeking a new reality. She took a deep breath, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. Because the artifact isn't just a discovery, it's more than just history. It's a force, and those who have tried to control it have lost themselves. Dr. Carrington wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. The first clue had led me to this point, the coordinates, the temple, and now a shadowy warning from Dr. Carrington. But that wasn't enough to stop me. If anything, it only fueled my curiosity. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that the truth had been hidden for a reason. And I was the one meant to uncover it. The journal confirmed everything I had feared. The artifact was real, and now, it seemed, I wasn't the only one looking for it. The sound of footsteps from the hallway jolted me back to reality. Dr. Vasquez and I exchanged a quick glance, both of us knowing that we weren't alone anymore. They were here. They had found us. "You should not have come here, Dr. Moore." As the hours passed, I became more and more obsessed with the symbols. The connections were starting to make sense. The more I connected the dots, the clearer the path became. But then, just as I was beginning to decipher the final part of the symbol, the door to the library slammed open. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I had already seen the artifact's power firsthand. I had felt it trying to take over my mind, trying to shape my thoughts, my perception of reality. But hearing Dr. Vasquez confirm what I had feared made it all the more real. His face was twisted with a strange, unsettling expression, almost as though he were a different person entirely. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't know how it would unfold, or whether I would be able to control the power I had unlocked, but I knew one thing. The world would never be the same again. I had to move quickly. There was no time to waste. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the artifact wasn't just an object to be found. It was the key to unlocking a secret that could reshape the world. And whoever was behind this, whoever had sent that message, was determined to stop me. I spun around, my pulse quickening. From the shadows stepped a figure. A man, tall and dressed in dark clothes, his face obscured by a hood. But there was something about him, something unnatural. His eyes gleamed with an eerie light, almost like they weren't human. The moment my fingers brushed the orb, the world around me shifted, but we didn't have much time. The journal's message had confirmed what I had suspected. The conspiracy was far deeper than I had imagined, but the worst part? The artifact's influence had already begun to extend beyond the walls of the villa. It had begun to affect the very people who sought it, turning them into pawns in its game. The lines between ally and enemy were becoming blurred. With a deep breath, I placed my hand on the artifact, and this time there was no resistance. The moment I made contact, I felt the world around me shift, the ground beneath my feet disappearing as if the very fabric of reality was warping. "You've been looking for something that doesn't belong to you," he said, his voice low. "You need to stop," and neither would I. And then I saw it, but I wasn't going to stop. Not now, not when I was so close. The artifact was within my grasp, and the conspiracy was starting to unravel, one piece at a time. But the closer I got, the more dangerous it became. I had no idea who I could trust or how far the conspiracy reached. But I knew one thing: the truth was worth everything. I froze, realizing the truth. He wasn't just any stranger. He was part of the organization trying to keep the artifact hidden. I spun around, heart pounding in my chest. There, standing in the doorway, was the last person I expected to see. Luis, the guide who had warned me before. But this time, he wasn't here to offer help. "I warned you," he continued, his voice low and threatening. "The artifact is not yours to claim. You've made a grave mistake by seeking it out." The chamber disappeared. The walls, the stone floor, the ceiling, everything dissolved into darkness. I was floating, weightless, surrounded by nothing but a vast, empty space. Then, in an instant, a voice filled my mind, deep and resonant, yet eerily familiar. We had to act fast. As Dr. Vasquez and I quickly gathered the journal and any notes we could find, the door to the study burst open, and figures cloaked in black appeared, their faces hidden behind masks. They moved swiftly, silently, closing in on us like hunters tracking their prey. "We need to stop it," I said, my voice low. "We can't let it fall into the wrong hands." "What's going on, Gabriel?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dr. Vasquez nodded, her expression somber. "We need to gather the others. There are still a few of us who understand the true danger. We can't keep it locked away forever, but we can make sure it doesn't destroy us." He smiled, too wide, too cold, and took a slow step toward me. I didn't know what would happen next, but I had no choice but to keep moving forward. There was no turning back. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. I had no idea who this man was, but his presence was overwhelming. He wasn't like the others I had encountered. He was part of the group trying to suppress the artifact's existence, but there was something more to him, something darker. I reached for the artifact, tucked safely in my bag, but as I did, I realized that the true danger wasn't the men standing in front of us. It was the artifact itself. It was manipulating everything, pulling the strings behind the scenes, turning us all into pawns in a game we didn't understand. "I should have stopped you before," Luis said, his voice cold, his eyes hard. "You don't know what you're dealing with. It's too dangerous, and now it's too late. You've already gone too far." Visions flooded my mind, flashes of history, glimpses of the future, and 1,000 voices all calling to me at once. The artifact was showing me everything. The hidden knowledge of the ancient world, the future of humanity, the power to control minds and manipulate perceptions. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing against me, as if the entire universe was trying to force its knowledge into my consciousness. You have come far, Evelyn. But this is where your journey ends. You're too late, I said, my voice trembling, trying to hide the panic creeping into my chest. Give it to us, one of the masked figures said, his voice cold and distorted. You have no idea what you've unleashed. We are the guardians, and you are the one who will pay the price for disturbing the balance. I couldn't control it. The artifact was too powerful, too overwhelming. But in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just an object. It was a being, a consciousness that existed outside of time and space. It had been watching, waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. And I was the one it had chosen. I felt a glimmer of hope, but it was fleeting. I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger. The people who wanted the artifact weren't just looking for power. They were looking for a way to control humanity itself. And if we couldn't stop them, the world as we knew it would cease to exist. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Louise was part of this. He wasn't just a guide, he was a guardian, or someone connected to the forces trying to stop me. I think you've come too far, Evelyn, he said softly, his voice no longer the familiar one I knew. You should have stopped when you had the chance. I'm not here to claim anything, I said, trying to steady my voice. I just want to know the truth. The man smiled, his expression sinister. You think this is just about a manuscript. The artifact is much more than that. And now, it's coming for you. The voice wasn't coming from any physical source. It was inside my head, as though the artifact itself was speaking directly to me. The realization hit me hard. The artifact wasn't just manipulating the world around me. It was manipulating me, but at what cost? I gripped the artifact tightly, feeling its presence, its power, its pull. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as if the artifact had control over my every thought, my every action. The voice continued, its tone mocking, yet strangely calm. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The hesitations, the strange behavior, the nervousness. It wasn't just fear. Gabriel had been working for them all along. He was a part of the conspiracy. And now, he was here to stop me from uncovering the truth. I had been betrayed. The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw something flicker behind them. A flash of something ancient and malevolent. We can't do this alone, Dr. Vasquez continued. We need an alliance, and we need it now. Why didn't you tell me the truth? I demanded. Why didn't you stop me before? With that, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing in the middle of the bustling street, more confused and frightened than ever. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with resolve. We won't give it to you. The artifact doesn't belong to you. It belongs to humanity, and it's time to stop hiding from it. I agreed. The artifact's power was far too great for any one person to control. I needed a team, people I could trust, people who would fight for the truth. The road ahead was uncertain, and the forces that sought to stop us were already closing in, but we couldn't wait any longer. The artifact's power was too dangerous to ignore. Louise didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped into the room, his face shadowed with something deeper than fear. I tried to warn you, but you have no idea what you've uncovered. The artifact, it's not just about power, it's about control. If you keep going down this path, you'll lose yourself. The artifact will make you believe things that aren't real. It will twist your perception until you can't tell the difference between truth and illusion. That was when I realized the magnitude of the situation. The artifact wasn't just an object of interest to historians. It was something far more powerful. And there were forces, real, dangerous forces, that were willing to kill to keep it hidden. The Guardians were only the beginning. I had no idea who else was involved, or how far their influence reached. But one thing was certain. They would stop at no. The truth, he sneered, is something you're not ready for. The visions became more intense, more chaotic, until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I was losing myself to the artifact's influence, but I couldn't stop. I had to understand. I had to know the truth, no matter what it cost. With a sharp gasp, I backed away, but he was too quick. Before I could react, he lunged at me, grabbing my arm with an iron grip. His strength was unnatural, and I struggled to break free. You're not going to find the artifact, Evelyn, he said, his grip tightening. It's too dangerous for you to understand. You think you seek the truth, but the truth is something you cannot comprehend. What you have found is beyond your understanding, and it will consume you if you continue. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the vision stopped. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. I had seen too much, and I knew too much. The artifact wasn't just something to be hidden away. It was the key to unlocking something bigger than anything I could comprehend. And no matter the cost, I couldn't turn back now. I fought against the artifact's grip on my mind, struggling to maintain control. The deeper I got into its influence, the harder it became to resist. It wanted me to believe its words, to submit to its power. It wanted me to stop. In that moment I knew I had no choice but to escape. With every ounce of strength I wrenched my arm free and bolted past him. As I fled through the narrow hallway, I heard him call out, his voice tinged with something almost sadistic. The masked figures moved toward us, their steps calculated, purposeful. I could feel the pressure building, the air crackling with tension. The artifact was awakening again, its power pulling at our very thoughts, manipulating everything in the room. We'll find them, I said. We'll find the others, and we'll stop this. With a swift motion, he stepped forward, and I could feel the energy around me crackle with intensity. I barely had time to react before he lunged, but just as quickly he vanished, melting back into the shadows. It was as though he hadn't been there at all. And just like that, the mission shifted. It was no longer about uncovering the truth. It was about protecting it, controlling it, and making sure the world didn't fall apart in the process. The artifact wasn't just an object. It was a new reality, and it was up to us to decide what kind of world we would create with it, but I couldn't. I refused to. I'd come too far to let it control me now. The artifact might be powerful, but I was determined to break free of its influence. I found myself standing in the temple, the artifact before me, still and silent. The world had returned to its normal state, but I was different. I had seen the truth. The truth about the artifact, about its power, and about the future of humanity. But I was no longer sure if I was the same person who had walked into the temple just hours ago. The artifact had changed me, reshaped my perception of reality, and now I was bound to it. I stood there, shaken, my mind racing. Who was this man? And why had he appeared now in the temple, as if he had been waiting for me? I'm sorry it had to end like this, but it's for your own good. Louis saw the determination in my eyes, and for a moment his face softened, almost as if he were regretting what had to come next. We were running out of time. I didn't stop running until I reached the street, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind was racing. Gabriel had betrayed me, and now I was more alone than ever. The forces that were trying to suppress the truth were closing in, and the web of lies had tightened around me. I had unlocked the artifact's true potential, but at what price? The answers were within my reach, but the confrontation had only deepened the mystery. The artifact, the forces protecting it, and the menacing figure who had just vanished. It was all connected, and now I was more certain than ever. This was bigger than anything I had anticipated. There was no turning back. With everything I had, I broke the connection, tearing myself away from the darkness. The chamber returned to its physical form, the temperature normal once again. My body was shaking, but I had done it. I had resisted. You've made your choice, he said quietly, but you'll regret it. We all do, in the end. Before I could respond, he turned and left, disappearing into the streets of the town. But I knew one thing for certain now. The artifact wasn't just a tool, a relic, or an object. It was something far more dangerous. It was a sentient being, and if I didn't figure out how to control it, it would control me. I had uncovered the first piece of the puzzle, but it had come at a price. The path ahead was growing darker, and the stakes were higher than ever. I had to move forward. The truth was out there, but so were the forces trying to keep it hidden. The worst part? I had no idea how deep the conspiracy went, or who I could trust anymore. Gabriel had been my ally, and now he was my enemy. The realization hit me hard. There was no one I could rely on. The truth was within my grasp, but the price for uncovering it was becoming higher than I could afford. I stood there, staring after him, my mind a storm of thoughts. Luis had been right about one thing. I was in too deep. But I couldn't turn back now. The truth was waiting for me, and I had to uncover it. The path was set. The artifact would either shape my future or destroy me. I could feel its pull, its power, and I knew I was getting closer. But as the days passed, I realized that the artifact wasn't just shaping my future. It was shaping my very perception of reality. And I didn't know if I could ever return to the life I once had.